The divers were not looking for it. They were mapping sediment patterns. Routine work, unremarkable water, the kind of dive that fills logbooks and changes nothing. Then the sonar returned something wrong. A shape that had no business being there, 76 meters long, resting on its side, sealed at the bow. For a moment, nobody spoke. They ran the reading twice. Same result. They almost flagged it as geological interference. A rock shelf, an anomalous density pocket. They almost moved on. What they had found was a Japanese submarine, lost in 1944, undocumented, no wreck coordinates on file, not listed in Allied recovery records, not listed in Japanese naval archives either. As if it had simply ceased to exist, not sunk, not destroyed, erased. And inside the forward hold, still sealed after 8 decades of pressure and cold darkness, were crates, dozens of them, stacked in organized rows, undisturbed. Nobody knew what was in them. That is still true today. The submarine sits at 280 meters, not unreachable, not catastrophically deep. Technical divers work at that depth. ROV systems operate there routinely. The hull is approximately 40% structurally intact. The stern has collapsed inward, likely the result of the initial sinking event, whatever that was. But the forward section held. High-resolution imaging confirmed wooden crates reinforced with metal banding. Density scanning returned one consistent reading throughout the hold. Heavy, solid, metallic, not munitions. The acoustic signature is wrong for ordnance. Wrong shape, wrong distribution. Something else. Something that was loaded with intention. To understand why this discovery unsettled the research community, you need to understand what it means for a submarine to vanish cleanly. Ships sink. That is documented. Vessels are lost to storms, to depth charges, to mechanical failure. But they leave traces, crew manifests, last known positions, radio silence reports, Allied intercepts, survivor testimony. Even classified missions leave bureaucratic residue, a routing code, a departure log, a supply requisition. This submarine left almost nothing. 2 references in declassified Allied intelligence from 1943. A routing code, a notation that a vessel matching its description was observed departing a port on the Chinese coast toward an undisclosed Pacific destination. Then silence, no loss confirmation, no arrival record. The routing code appears twice and then vanishes from every subsequent document as if someone went back through the files and removed the thread. The research team spent 3 months cross-referencing the wreck's physical dimensions against every cataloged submarine class in the Pacific theater. The hull geometry, the estimated displacement, the conning tower profile, all consistent with a mid-war Japanese transport submarine, not a combat vessel, a carrier. That distinction matters enormously. Transport submarines were not built to fight. They were built to move things that could not be moved on the surface. Too valuable, too sensitive, or too dangerous to risk on a ship that enemy aircraft could reach. Whatever was loaded into that forward hold was loaded because someone decided it could not travel any other way. Here is where the standard documentary would soften its language. This one will not. Because the markings on those crates do not point to one answer. They point to 3. And each one carries a different weight. The first reading is the most forgiving. The logistics stamp visible on the crate surfaces belongs to a supply chain active between 1942 and 1944. Standard imperial military material, strategic metals, copper, tin, raw industrial stock. A war machine running low on resources routing materials through unconventional channels. The density profile fits, the routing corridor fits, the vessel type fits. You could close the file here and feel satisfied. Except for the routing code. 2 Allied intelligence references, then nothing. A legitimate cargo transfer does not get scrubbed from the record. It gets filed, archived, eventually declassified. Bureaucracies do not erase things that do not need erasing. The second reading requires a brief detour into what historians call the dissolution shipments. In 1943 and 1944, as Allied advances made Japanese defeat increasingly calculable, certain elements within the imperial military began moving assets. Not retreating, moving. Gold reserves, looted cultural objects, currency from occupied territories, jewelry, rare materials, financial instruments. Some of it surfaced after the war. Recovery operations in the Philippines and Manchuria retrieved portions of documented transfers. But a significant volume was never recovered. It did not disappear because it was destroyed. It disappeared because it was hidden. placed somewhere the post-war accounting could not easily reach. The density readings from that forward hold are consistent with refined metal.
Gold reads like that on acoustic scanning. So does copper. So does lead.
The scan cannot distinguish between them.
But if you apply the weight estimates to the number and size of crates visible in the ROV footage, the volume is not insignificant.
It is the kind of number that makes funding committees nervous and governments quiet. The third reading is the one nobody wants to publish. A forensic imaging analyst, brought in specifically to examine the degraded crate markings, identified something beyond the logistics stamp. A secondary mark, partially deteriorated, small but consistent, under image enhancement, with documentation associated with Unit 731. If you are unfamiliar with that designation, the summary is this. Unit 731 was the Imperial Japanese Biological and Chemical Warfare Research Program operating in Manchuria between 1936 and 1945. It conducted human experimentation on a scale that remains one of the least publicly examined chapters of the Second World War. After Japan's surrender, American intelligence made a decision: immunity for data.
Researchers who had run the program handed over findings, records, experimental results, methodology.
The U.S. government reviewed the material, determined it had strategic value for its own biological weapons research, and buried the prosecution. What was transferred is partially known. What was not transferred is a question that has occupied historians for decades. Some of that documentation was never recovered. If any portion was boxed and sealed, loaded onto a classified transport vessel with orders to move it beyond Allied reach, then those crates do not contain metal, they contain records.
The kind that could reopen legal proceedings. The kind that certain governments, even now, have structural reasons to keep sealed.
The discovery was submitted to 3 institutions. 2 did not respond. The third issued a short public statement: jurisdictional review pending. Heritage assessment ongoing. No timeline provided. That statement was released 14 months ago. Nothing has followed it. No excavation funding. No follow-up dive announced. No academic paper submitted to peer review. The wreck has not been touched. This pattern has appeared before. Maritime historians working in contested waters have documented it across multiple recovery cases spanning the last 4 decades. It is not orchestrated suppression. That framing is too simple and too dramatic. It is something more mundane and more durable. Overlapping jurisdictions create paralysis. Governments with potential liability prefer inaction to disclosure. Funding bodies avoid projects where the findings cannot be predicted or controlled in advance. The research stops not because anyone issues an order to stop it. It stops because nobody issues an order to continue. There is a difference. It is important. One requires a conspiracy. The other requires only bureaucracy doing what bureaucracy has always done, defaulting to stillness when movement carries risk. The deeper irony is technological. 280 meters is a depth that presents no serious engineering challenge in 2024. Remotely operated vehicles reach 3 times that routinely. Atmospheric diving suits can put a human researcher within arm's reach of that hull. The capability to open those crates has existed for years. What is not materialized is the institutional structure willing to act on what it might find. And that gap between capability and will is where most of this story actually lives. 3 research teams have expressed formal interest in the site. 2 are academic institutions with relevant expertise and no access to the funding required for a full recovery operation. 1 is a private salvage organization, the kind that operates in the space between archaeology and commerce, where the legal status of recovered materials is intentionally ambiguous.
None have received permits.
The site sits in international waters where jurisdictional authority is genuinely contested. 3 nations have plausible historical claims. None has formally asserted one, because asserting a claim means accepting responsibility for what the claim contains. There is a particular quality to objects that have spent 80 years in darkness.
Not mystical, physical.
The pressure at 280 meters preserves certain materials better than surface conditions would. Wood, under those circumstances, can retain structural integrity for over a century. Metal resists corrosion differently without oxygen cycling.
Whatever is in those crates may be in better condition than documents or materials stored on the surface across the same 80 years.
History does not degrade uniformly. Sometimes it keeps better in the dark. The divers who found this wreck filed their report, noted the anomaly, and returned to their sediment survey. Their work did not mention the submarine. It was flagged in an appendix. A graduate researcher reviewing archived sonar data 6 weeks later is the one who recognized what the shape meant. That is how most of history actually surfaces.
Not through expeditions designed to find it, through someone reading something carefully that someone else almost discarded.
280 meters, sealed hold, organized crates, metallic density, a routing code that vanishes, a secondary marking that points somewhere no one wants to look, and above it, a silence that is not the silence of indifference.
It is the silence of awareness.
Of institutions and governments that know exactly where this wreck is, know what questions its contents might answer, and have calculated, each in their own way, that the answers are not worth the asking. That calculation may be correct, it may be the responsible position, or it may be the same calculation that kept Unit 731's researchers out of the Nuremberg dock. The same one that let looted assets stay buried while survivors of the occupation spent their lives without restitution.
History is not neutral about those calculations.
It tends to judge them, eventually, with the same clarity it judges everything else. It just needs enough time and access. The wreck is still there. The crates are still sealed, somewhere in a filing system, academic, governmental, or private. The permits that could authorize a recovery are waiting for a signature that has not come. The ocean is patient. The question is whether we are patient enough to keep waiting or honest enough to admit that the waiting is a choice.